Ne je ne go wo wo be ha den ste. Ne je ne go den go be ha den ste. Hey yana hey 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 yana. Ne je ne go wo wo yoth gwe be ha den ste. Ne je ne go wo wo be ne takis.
Akondisi ajabe shein ish shmut kohonjish akodi wala beha ish alia shita no joe alsab belganik jobe khishna wala jno yega alla en leche nina halongat alia ba konsen lelchinda والخارج كيتعيش ولا به شياجة إن شخا هذا بقول جن بجنو جو إيخد إسات ولا نني إيخد باكنسن أحيانا.
When I hear the phrase "I'll with a bit," I think of when you are out cheering and you're trying to catch one of those last withers, and he flies through the air, headbutts you in the eye, leaves you with a nice bruiser, and then you continue cheering. You get it done. You figure out a way to make it work despite everything that may be mounting against you. That's what I think about. And then you plan the next butchering.
Man, there's a song from Bruce Springsteen, and it's our anthem song, because when we're down and out, I put that song on, and it says there's going to be hard times coming, there's going to be good times coming, but there's also going to be hard times coming. Swing that ball at me, because I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work as hard as I can to do what needs to be done. It's just being honest and upfront and working your butt off. Bring that wrecking ball on is all I can say, and that's what the word is that. Ne je ne go wo wo yoth gwe be ha den ste. Ne je ne go wo wo be ne takis. Ne je ne go den go be ha den ste. Hey yana hey 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 yana. Ne je ne go wo wo do te be ha den.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Tall with a Bit, our Navajo Contemporary Arts lecture series. And I'm so glad that everybody has been able to join us today. We are here for our last segment of Tall with a Bit for the fall 2020 semesters. I'm really excited about that. We are going to be joined today with none other than one of our own, Kayla Jackson. Kayla, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi y'all, I'm Kayla Jackson. Adona inishlinigi a maideshkijin shlonkia ani bashijin twitchini a dashache do Scottish do German a dashanele. That's me as a Navajo woman. That's how I would represent myself. I graduated from Dine College, the first with the BFA program, and now I am in my MFA program out at Colorado State University at Fort Collins. It's all online now due to the pandemic. If it wasn't for this pandemic, I'd probably be out in Fort Collins raising cane or something, trying to get my degree. But now I'm here and I'm helping, and I'm excited. And so I've been chosen to be one of the artisans, and I'm humbled. I don't feel like I have that much caliber, but I'm very thankful that I was chosen.
Well, we're super excited to have you on board, primarily because, well, first of all, not only are you one of our, our own Dine College students, but you are our first graduate from the BFA program here on campus. So I was hoping that you'd be able to talk to us a little bit about that, your experience in the BFA program here.
Yeah, it was a very good experience for me. I got my associates from Dine College, and I decided to go to Fort Lewis because it's the closest place to get my BFA there. But it just didn't feel right. And so I came back to Dine College and I was bugging Paul, I was bugging Dawn Whitesinger. I was like, when is the BFA gonna be ready? I need to graduate from here. It wouldn't fit right with me and my soul if I didn't graduate from Dine College with my BFA, because when I left with my associates, they were talking about starting the BFA and I wanted to stay there, but I felt the need to leave. And then I came back and I just kept bugging them. And finally I got approved. And I also was in the NCAP series. I was one of the students there, and I stayed there for a semester, and that's when they started the BFA. And I decided to do photography in my associates. I was in Karen's photography 1 class, and I really enjoyed it. And people were saying I had a good eye. I didn't know what that meant, but now I understand it. And I got my BFA in photography with Karen, and she's a very good influence to me, and she supported me and encouraged me. And the whole process of getting it at Dine College is I had to get it from Dine College. I wanted to prove to students here on the reservation, you can get a successful degree on the reservation, either at NTU or Dine College. And in art, the way I thought about it is that art here on the reservation, it's very strong in our cultural economy and the creative economy here on the reservation. That's what sustains most of our relatives. And so I felt the need to get my BFA and prove to students and to future kids, be a role model for them, not just for the little ones, but maybe older people who decided to stop. I wanted to do that for myself and for my family and for anybody in general who adores the arts, just like as I do. Yeah. You're on mute, Christine.
There we go. Thank you. We started the program. I had a huge problem with this when we first went on with Jared So and his dad, Daryl So. It took me a second to talk about pandemic technology to work through the mutes. And here I am doing it again. But yeah, Kayla, we had Kayla as part of our Navajo Cultural Arts program, and we tried like heck to keep Kayla on board. But you know, once that BFA program opened up, that's really what she jumped at. And I was actually really thinking about you today because we're getting ready to launch our minor in Navajo silversmithing. And I was like, if we still had Kayla, which I'm glad you're not here, I'm glad you graduated. But yeah, I was like, oh, this would be perfect for students like Kayla, who was looking, you know, really to emphasize in one of these other areas and then also get these minors. And so I guess what led you to photography? How did you get you know, pulled into that?
Oh, it started with my dad. He's a talker and he talks a lot, and he would tell my siblings and I stories about how he grew up, because he grew up with his grandparents, his Masane Dobache. And so when he would tell his stories, it felt like poetry. And I kind of thought of myself, not poetically, but my images are kind of poetic. And I wanted to capture the images from my childhood and from growing up here in Round Rock on our ranch here. We have cattle, horses, and sheep and goats. And so I want to inspire the younger generation and pay homage to the older people who have fought so hard for our livestock industry and the cultural industry. I want to sustain it, and I want to provide a really good composite, to a very good composition of how I want to present our livelihood. And my dad always had a camera when he grew up, and he would always videotape us when we'd go out to rodeos. He'd record us and we'd watch our runs. When he'd come home, we'd go bell racing or rope or whatever. And when we'd come home, we'd watch our videos. And I was very sheltered when I grew up. My dad always encouraged us to be very creative, and I feel like I'm the strongest out of my siblings being very creative. I probably took all their juices from the womb or something. I don't know. I pulled everything from it. And that's how I built myself, and my brand and my career is basically about art. And I don't think I'll ever get tired of it. I won't ever get tired of talking about art, that's for sure. Yeah.
No, and that totally builds up into what you're doing right now, right?
Mhm.
I was excited to hear Carla. Dr. Britton had been talking about, I'm bringing on somebody to come help work with the grants. And as you guys know, we're a grant, funded program. So the more grants, the better. I'm all about grant writing, all about grant programming. And so I was like, I wonder who she's going to bring on. And she's like, oh, this woman called Kayla Jackson. I was like, I know Kayla
Oh,
Jackson.
God.
And so I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about, well, the grant that you're working with right now associated with Dine College, as well as your role in all of that.
Okay. So before I talk about that, I kind of had an epiphany when I was applying for graduate school. I got accepted to Texas Tech for their photography program in MFA in photography, but I felt that I didn't want to just do photography. I wanted to be more versatile. So I was looking around and I saw CSU, Colorado State, and I applied to their MFA in leadership in the arts. And it has many branches, so I could do whatever I want with that degree, but it all encompasses sustaining arts within a community, within a place. And so I was like, oh my God, if I could learn all that I can from this program and bring it back to the reservation, we can thrive, not just for myself, but I could help other people understand that we're very strong and we're very smart. Our elders are really smart. They they I guess they really showcase the arts in a way that it's enticing to us young people. We're curious about the arts. And so that's when I saw that Carla got that grant, and they were talking about it when I was graduating, and it always was in the back of my mind. And so Carla reached out to me and told me about the grant, and it got approved. So I was like, oh my gosh, how can I help? Anyway, I want to help. And so I applied and I got the position, and now I'm there as the Art Place Grant Coordinator. It's a very lengthy title. When I saw my acceptance letter, I was like, oh wow, I'm a coordinator. Okay, I guess I really have to button up my pants and be a big girl and do this. So I started that, and now the grant is funded from UNM, the Indigenous and Designing Planning Institute at UNM, and it's funneled into Dine College, and we're partnering with the Navajo Cultural Arts program with Christine's grant, and we're kind of like a sister program, but not really. But we felt the need that both of our grants aligned, and we both are sending the same message to the community and to future students and current students. So that's what we're doing. And I partnered with Christine with the All with a Best series, which is very fulfilling to me, learning about the different artisans here on the reservation and how they do art, and just how did they overcome hardships of becoming so successful in their fields. And that's what the grant does. And we're all community based. The Art Place grant, it's from the federal government, and their mission is to fruitfullize art within a community, making sure that the communities understand that art is a viable asset within the leadership community, whether it's politics, whether it's educational, whether it's social, everything. It encompasses the Art Place grant that we're trying to present for the students. So that's my job, and I'm very thankful and grateful that I have this position.
One of the things that I really love, and I want us to go and talk about in just a second, if you could let us know, because if you guys aren't following Kayla on Instagram, make sure that you do that. She posts up all sorts of photos and just really gives you a snapshot of the, the wide variety of different types of work that she does. But is the concept, I know that you're starting this podcast, right, on creative economies, which I absolutely love because I'm a closet political science person. And even just understanding and taking a look at the concept of as like the foundations of Navajo traditional economic systems is something beyond just looking at how we're related to people, looking at as the very origins of how we understand how commerce functions, from traditional and ceremonial perspectives, and all the way to even the abuses of it, the pushes of it and how it's interwoven into even today's capitalistic, right, economic systems. So I was hoping that you could give us a little glimpse into this podcast that you have coming out, because I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. So the reason why I guess started the podcast was my arts and policy and advocacy class. My professor, he gave us an option. You either write a really big research paper that's lengthy and wordy, or you do a documentary or a 3-series podcast. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do a podcast. I can talk forever. And so I decided to do the podcast. And in that class, that's where I picked up the term creative economy. And I never heard that term at all. And it was so new to me, and I felt the need to present it to anybody on the reservation, any reservation, because I'm pretty sure all the reservations, they know holistically about the art and cultures within their communities. And so I wanted to strictly gear it to my Navajo people and get their gears turning, the understanding of what the creative economy here on the reservation. There was no analytics, it was not politics, nothing. It was just an organic approach of us thinking about it and understanding that we're 10 steps ahead from these Western people, you know, like that's the way I thought about it. And that's how I geared it. And my professor, he was so understanding, and he encouraged me. He's like, I can see this as a broader spectrum. You could do more and push the boundaries. And so I really thought about it, and I only have 3 podcasts up, but I feel like I now I'm talking about it, I have to really fulfill it. And I'm not just gearing it, the first 3 podcasts, I just talked about the creative economy. And I also had one of my friends and colleagues, not colleagues, but kind of my mentor, Shane Hendren, he talked about the creative economy. And he talked about the time that he served on the Indian and Arts and Crafts Association. He served as their vice president, and he talks about that as well. So that's my podcast. And I called it The Creative Cowboy because I had to call it that. One day I was sitting with my dad at the dinner table. I was like, Dad, I'm doing a podcast. He was like, what's a podcast? And so I had to explain to him. It's kind of like KTNN, but just I'm the only person talking. And he's like, okay. So I was talking to him. I was like, what should I call it? And I came up with the creative, and he was like, how about creative cowboy? I was like, okay, I can talk to all these creative people who are cowboys. And so after this next step, I'm going to push it towards that, because my Western roots, they run really deep, and anytime I can talk about a cowboy or the cowboy lifestyle, I'm going to do it. Yeah.
And that's something that definitely comes out in your photography, right? That's one of the things.
Yeah.
I remember going to see one of your pieces. The fine arts faculty, I love them at Dine College, and they think that I'm a really artsy person, but deep down, I really don't know, just like baby stuff about the arts.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that they did is they invited me to come take a look at I think it was like the junior and senior level BFA students and their exposition. So I got to see your photography and Raina Brown's photography, and I forget who else was there as well. But one of the things that I did see in that series was that strong emphasis on the cowboy lifestyle. So if you could talk to us a little bit about that, tell us the origin of that, because we know from your blurb, right, the blurb for today's talk is that's you grew up in Round Rock, right? You have this wonderful relationship, not just with your animals, but with your father. So how has it become this nexus for you to kind of bring everything together?
So photography is the fastest way for me to get my product out there. That's what I thought, because I'm a fast person. I'm very fast paced, and I want to ride the fastest horses we have and chase all the cows. And so I felt the need that photography was so quick and so easy, and I really paid attention to, I watch a lot of YouTube. So as Karen was teaching me, Miss Walletto, she was teaching me, I was also doing my own research and understanding how to do a more complex way of photography and cowboys, the fine art, with my fine art eye, because Karen was always stressing that make sure it's fine art photography, because that's what we are presenting to the students. And I'm like, okay, fine art. So I would do my own research, and it helped a lot, because I was in Matthew's class in drawing, and you have to be very finesse in the way you draw. And fluid lines, and all the line strokes make up one beautiful drawing. And that always plays in the back of my mind. How can I make my photographs more complex? How can, and my photographs have to have a really big, the context behind the photograph, the composition, the the concept has to be very big. It has to have a story alongside to it. And so I have a, what is it called, a PowerPoint. I don't know if you're okay with me sharing that. Okay. It says host disabled, attended screen sharing. Christine, you're on mute.
Granted, that's the only thing that I had seen up to then of your work. And so it'd be great if you could walk us through some of your pieces.
Okay. So this piece is kind of my self-portrait. I took this recently, probably last month. I did a blog as well on my website. So this kind of was the photograph I used, and it's a new headshot for myself. I made my sister take it, but I love it. I love it. This was my very first photograph that I took that kind of fulfilled the need that I could be an artist, a photographer. Don Whitesinger, he bought this image from me, and I asked him, because Don's all about color, complementary colors. So there's yellow from the building and purple from the sand. And so he's all about colors, and conceptually, he really liked this photograph. And so this was probably the pivotal moment when I kind of gained confidence in my photograph ability. And this one I took recently is of my little calf, Joey.
My favorite one. I love this one.
This one's recent. I haven't printed it yet, but this one I took. He's hurtled up into the little feeding bin, which is the old tire, and I took it on top of the panel. On the bottom, you could see the little green panel right here. And this, I did this in my undergrad, this photograph of my dad's hands, and a lot of people really understand it, and just the weathered lines on my dad's hand, and you could tell he works a lot with the horses. And Raina was the one who kind of coincided that song Daddy's Hand. She was like, every time I see that image, I think of that song. I was like, oh yeah, that's so neat. And this is one of my recent works. This is what's his name, Charles Benson, and I took it on top by the announcer stand. He was like getting ready, warming up to go ride his bull, and I saw him doing that. And so I was up there being like a paparazzi and taking images of him, and I like the shadows and the contrast in this image is very strong. And this one is of a bull at a bull riding in Coolfields. I call it Mud Bull, and the finesse and the lines, the shapes and the imagery and the what is it, I just love it. I'm very flustered. I haven't did one of these in a while. And this is of my dad. He's riding out by Round Rock, and just this was last year when we had a lot of rain, and you could tell that there's a lot of grass, even though they're dry, but the cattle still eat that. I'm really big on land management. I do a lot of readings. And so this image is it makes me feel good to see foliage on the ground and to see my dad happy just riding his horse. And this is Karen's favorite. I know that. I was feeding one morning before class at Dine College, and I was rushing, and we had to present images, and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't took pictures. So I went out and I was feeding, and I had my camera on one hand, and I was just clicking away. And this was one of the images that I captured, was me throwing the hay and my horse Onyx in the back. And just, it's kind of poetic just to think about it. It's like memory in motion, or that one, yeah. And this one's my favorite personally. I called it Weathered Calf. This is of my little calf Mallory, and it was raining that day, and I had to take pictures of my animals that day. They just the resilienceness of the cattle that we have here at Round Rock is very strong, because here we don't have a lot of water. We have to provide the water for the animals and the foliage and the hay and the grain, and we take care of them. And just that, I just love her. She's so spunky, and she has a piece of grass coming out of her mouth, or hay. And this image I took out in Texas. My sister's best friend, Jacinta, she's a horse trainer out in Texas, and she trains Mustangs for people out there, because the BLM, they have the annual horse show, and they provide a lot of horses to horse trainers out from around the world, and they gather in Texas, and you have 90 days to train a Mustang. And this was one of her projects. And I saw, this is the Freeze brand on the neck. That's what the BLM, that's how they identify their Mustangs, that they either gather from the Grand Canyon or from Nevada, and they distribute them. You have to pay for the horse that you're going to train for 90 days, and it's a competition. And so at the end of the competition, they have an auction, and they sell these BLM horses to whoever is willing to buy them, and they have to be trained, and it's a really cool process. And so she wanted me to capture some images of her training, and this was the strongest one that I took. Just the wind blowing. It's kind of sad, because they take these wild horses and they train them, but if they don't train them and if they don't take them off the land, then they overrun the land, they overturn the land, and there's no progression within the process. And those are the images that that I shared thus far. Yeah, I can end my share screen.
Yeah, I mean, those are, it's just so great to see your work continue in that fashion. And I guess this kind of brings us into one of our questions, which is weird asking you these questions, because you asked, our guests these questions. But about specifically, so when we take a look at photography, and I've had, the pleasure, we've had the pleasure of working with like Will Wilson and, gosh, just like who else? Raphael. We talked with Raphael during the summertime, and one of the questions that we ask them as photographers is that there's this generalized stigma about Navajos or Native American people and photography in general. And so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about perhaps some of the tensions that you found between photography and cultural knowledge and cultural knowledge holding.
Yeah, culturally, I don't think we're at the point where we, as young people, the younger generation, I classify myself as a young person, we have to respect our cultural identity. And if we photograph something of ourselves, it loses the spirit. Because my grandma was so big on that, she would always tell us, don't take pictures of me, don't take pictures of me. And I never did, but her younger grandkids or whoever, they would take pictures of her, and she wouldn't appreciate that. So there's that finite line that I had to understand. And I'm so thankful that I went to Dine College, because the they enforce that. It's ingrained in your mind after you graduate. Thank goodness, because if we don't understand that, the hajonje and also the bad side, we have to have a balance. And so that's where my photography, I don't want to overshare the cultural experience. So I know that there are some Navajo photographers who are very big on culturally, you're not supposed to take pictures at ceremonies or at a canalta, anything sacred. I don't do that, nor do I respect that idea of when people do that. And so now that's where I really want to hone in on my Western lifestyle, my cowboy lifestyle. That's where I know I'm willing to share that aspect of my life. I'm traditional, but I'm not going to share full on all of the details within my traditional stories and the way my upbringing, my prayers, and the songs that I was taught when I was younger. And now to this day, they're protecting me. So I don't tie the two together. And I guess that's why I do my capture the rodeo lifestyle and the cowboy lifestyle because I'm willing to share that with the younger generation. And if they want to learn about Navajo philosophy, there's other means of sharing that. It's more orally. That's the way it was taught. That's the way we learn, is orally. We're taught to listen and learn and sit there and you learn and you listen. That's how we learn. And that's why I don't capture anything culturally, which is, I'm fine with that. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question. That's a kind of a tough question.
It's a tough question. And, you know, we've
Yeah.
seen like all of these different realms. And like I said, we've been talking to these artists and to find out, okay, where are these tensions, these cultural tensions mixed with, you know, these fine art tensions, and when do they come together and they're able to like have this nice like dialogue, and when do they clash? Like, are there those moments of clash? And I think that's one of the areas that you're highlighting right now, is this concept of clashing. And so you know, yeah, you answered a question, and you know, it's difficult because at the same time you don't want to offend people, but you know, everybody as an artist, you have the ability to have your own authorship and your own self-direction, which is pretty awesome. And so so that's also something to respect as well. You talked a little bit about that photo that Don Whitesinger purchased from you. I'm interested about like that specific moment where you said that you started to gain confidence, right? At that confidence level in being able to take photos, but also being able to present and sell photos. So can you talk a little bit about how you gain that confidence?
Hard work. You have like, just in rodeo, that's how it is. The practice, you have to practice really hard. Fall down, get up. Fall down 8 times, get up like 9 times. So you have to practice a lot. Always have your camera with you. I don't do that as often because now I'm typing away and I have homework and I have written essays that I have to provide, and now I'm really paying attention to how I present myself with my words. But now, I think back then I was very creative and I was willing to fail, because out of 100 images, I'm probably only going to get 2, and I'm fine with getting 2. And you just have to keep working hard. And my dad works, my sister and I, like his sons, and my dad I only have one brother, and he'd rather rodeo, and so me and my sister are always stuck here taking care of hauling hay, roping the cows and make sure they're getting doctored really good, and taking care of the horses. So I'm well aware of hard work, but this was a different kind of hard work. The creative hard work. You have to be very disciplined to understand how creatively you can be successful. And I can't judge anyone's success over mine. My judgment of success is internal. And so I can't say, oh, that artist is so successful. They have XY amount of artwork that they sold and they have a collection at the herd. They're so successful. I can't say that, but I'm proud of them. And the way I judge my success is if I'm inspiring people and if I'm being a really good role model for the younger generations, because I have young nieces and nephews and I want them to express themselves creatively, and so I want to be their auntie who will help them in that manner. And it all comes down to hard work, and the creativeness of hard work. Like when you're stamping bracelets, I remember I had kind of a hard time sawing when I was in silversmithing with Wilson Aronith. He was having a saw, or like you have to cut around the silver or whatnot, and that was hard. And but you have to be disciplined, and next thing you know, it's second nature. You can whip out your camera and you could take 10 good images out of 50, which is really good to me. Yeah.
It's definitely a challenge. We have over at NCAP have like dabbled in photography, primarily because, you know, well, we have to take images the best possible, right? And we're always documenting for grants, because grants always want to see the photos that they can publish and stuff like that. So there's all these different avenues of of photography. And I like the fact that you brought up how you really appreciate that, like the fast pace of that photography kind of really matches your personality. But I also remember from when you were talking with and having that conversation with Will Wilson, right, on the tintype photography, that you have this great appreciation for the slow, right, that's very slow, tedious, almost delicate process. And so I was wondering if you have, and then there's also like commercial photography. And because I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, why didn't Kayla take pictures of her silversmithing? We should have got her to take pictures of her, like an autobiographical journey through silversmithing. But do you have a particular like genre that you most like?
So right now I'm strictly just digital photography, and I do dabble into commercial. It's not really strictly commercial. I have friends who do silver work or they do leather crafting, and so it's kind of like there's this thing on Instagram as being an influencer. So people are dressing up and they're making themselves pretty and they're highlighting their friends' work. And so I have a friend, his name's Mud Lowry. He's Lumbee and he's from Texas and he does silver work. And so I went out to Fort Worth, and that was pre-COVID, and I went out there and we had a photo shoot. And so there's that. It's not strictly for like commercial photography, but I know that Will Wilson does the tintype, and Karen introduced us to that. And the only kind of experimental photography that I got into was vellum, printing on vellum, and you do the gold leafing on the back. And that's the only type of experimental photography that I got into. But I appreciate any type of photography, anything creatively I appreciate. And that's why I was really floored that Will got to do all of that. And you have to present yourself. You have to put yourself into situations, experiencing different things. And I haven't really got the chance to do that photography wise because I was just strictly school. Learn this one trade of digital photography and make sure you kind of master it, understand it until it becomes second nature to you. So that's what I did with digital photography. But now I'm willing to be more explorative in my efforts in photography. I want to buy an old black and white kind of roundup film that my dad used to shoot us with, and actually understanding the exposure and make sure my f-stops are right. I know I shoot manually, but this is a whole different type where you have to carry a notebook and make sure your exposures are all correct in different moments in different lighting. So that's more of a scientific process and more tedious, but I'm willing to do that now that I'm willing to explore. Yeah. And like what I said with Wilson's talk, you're learning a whole different language when you do that. You have like when you do commercial photography or you do tintype photography or you do black and white photography. They're different languages, but they all talk to each other. They have, I guess we're the Athabascan speakers. So there's Navajo, there's the Inuit tribes, there's the Apaches. So like it's a different language, but they all communicate. They all present themselves differently, but it's all under one umbrella, I guess you could say.
Yep, definitely. And I think we started talking a little bit about that with Will when we were talking about how like photography is like this language that can bring people who don't speak the same, right, verbal language. It becomes this way to bring people together, right? And so I appreciate that as well. What do you think up to now has been the hardest obstacle that you have had to overcome as an emerging artist?
I don't think my journey has been that difficult. I know one day it's going to kick me in the butt and I'm going to have to answer that really fast and I'll know. But right now, I think the hardest thing was, okay, so the hardest thing that happened to me was when I first started going out. I remember Karen was telling us, you have to have a digital camera. And she goes, I want you to have a manual button. And I only had like a Canon little camera, and so I told my dad, and my dad's like, well, you have cows, sell your cows and buy that camera. And it was hard because I love my cows. And so I bit the bullet and I loaded the cows up when we went to Cortez and we sold them, and I got that money and I had to buy my own camera. And that camera, it provided so much for me. I got to express myself creatively, and it was an expensive camera to me at the time. And now I'm fortunate enough, I finally upgraded and I got a new camera. And it's hard financially to be a photographer. You have to be willing to provide X amount of dollars to produce 10 images. And people don't understand the fact when you purchase a camera and you're a photographer and you label yourself as a photographer, you have to practice and understand that you're going to provide for what those people pay you. Like, let's say if you're doing graduation photos, somebody's going to say, Kayla, can you take my images? And so I would tell them, okay, I'm going to give you 10 images for this amount of money. And some people say, oh, that's too much. And I'm like, well, my equipment costs this much money, this much dollars, and my time and the gas and the fuel and all of that combined. And so that's why I don't do a lot of family photography or kind of do that here on the reservation, because I know people struggle financially. But for my finances, it was buying my very first camera. That was the hardest thing. Yeah.
Yep.
But I still don't think I've made it as an artist. There's still a lot that I'm learning, and I'm willing to throw myself in the mud and put my name out there. Yeah.
No, it definitely, and we're excited to see exactly, you know, where your career path is going to go now that you have like this multi background with both like the practical as well as the academic approach to arts. And so it's exciting to see where that and all that grant. I love people who work with the grants. I think it's so underappreciated sometimes, but working with grants and how to, you know, multi-manage projects that are going on in event planning and that kind of stuff. And so another question that we have that we always like to ask our students and our guests is, you know, what kind of advice do you have for up and coming potential Dine College BFA students?
Just do it. It doesn't matter. I guess I learned it the easy way because I was the first one to graduate from there. And now I see so much changes that are happening at the college. And I'm so glad that that's happening for the students. And it's all for the students. And that's why I came back and I wanted to help the students, because I was there like last year in December was my last semester there. And I wanted to see change, and I want to be a part of that change. And just know that arts is a very successful economic entity on the reservation, and don't downgrade yourself for becoming an artist, because we are so successful. We're culturally successful, we're financially successful, and we're amplifying the world with our art, because we're sought after as an artistic tribe here on the reservation. As Navajos, people pay so much money to hear us talk about art as Navajos. And you think about it, why would a little Navajo girl want to talk about art? But there's a lady out in Paris, France, that just is so encouraged and inspired by our Navajo artisans that they want to talk to us. So know that you're not just supporting your family, you're supporting the world, the economic world. And I want us to have a global effect at Dine College, and we do. And that's why I really enjoy the president that we have. He's not just my uncle, but he's really pushing the means of getting people there to look at the college in a very good way. And I'm proud of the college, and I'm proud to say that I graduated from there, because I can just drive 20 minutes from my house and get to the college. And that was my road to success, was driving from Round Rock to Tsaile. And now I travel through the internet to Colorado, like to Colorado Springs and Fort Collins for my success now, but that's just virtually. But the college, the BFA program at Dine College is strong. I think what makes it so strong is the faculty. That you have Don Whitesinger, a world-renowned painter and a philosopher. To me, he's a philosopher. Whenever I need philosophical advice, I go, Don, what do you have to say? I was asked this question, what do I say to that? And so how do I respond? And so I asked Don that, and he's always so willing to help, and he's there for the students. I know that. ever since I started there in 2014, he's always been a confidant in mine, and he's a very good mentor to the younger students and to everybody there. Faculty, people appreciate him, and I'm so glad that they have him and take advantage of Don because he's about to retire, and I kept yap in his ear, don't retire until I graduate. He's like, okay, so to get on that. And the faculty there, they're very nice. And Karen, I'm pretty sure she retired, and I was just so, I just love her. She always supported me, encouraged me, and she always made sure that I had a voice there at the college. And I feel that the BFA program is so small that you could talk to your professors so openly, and they're willing to provide you with critiques or support you. I know at Matthew's class, I really enjoyed his teaching classes, especially drawing. And in drawing, I did more writing than in my art history classes. Every week we had readings and we wrote, and that's what really inspired me to write, was about drawing. Because how do you write about drawing? You can draw about drawing, but you can write about it as well. So I was so appreciative of Matthew and his teaching style. And Carla, now she's my supervisor, she was also my professor, and she kind of pushed us to the thought that we have more of a, I guess, a historical sense, thinking about us as a historic being, which I didn't really understand, but now I do. Yeah, I mean, the BFA program at Dine College, it's new, but it's growing. And Paul has done a wonderful job producing this, the curriculum behind it. Like, I wouldn't know how to do that. And getting this grant at the college, I'm so excited about it. And I did take a class in leadership in the arts, and we had to write a grant application. And now I know what the means of writing a grant is, and it's a daunting task, and you have to be very thorough in the way you ask for money. There's money out there for us. We have, yeah, there's a lot of money for us tribal people, which we do deserve it, and take really good care of it and use it wisely.
Yep, you bring up so many like awesome points, right? And if you guys didn't know, our president also has a photography degree, which I thought was kind of really unique because I don't know, he ended up teaching like one of our photography classes here at the college, which I think is great. I love it when administrators teach classes because it helps to keep that ingrained, like that the actual on the ground, how's teaching, how's the relationship between the student teacher and in perspective, because they're actually teaching. So I know it's also very hard to do that as an administrator too. But yeah, that's definitely one of the things that we have going for us. So, and I'm excited to see where the program grows as well. I'm all about getting a building. That's what I want. We want our own arts building. So, so hopefully, Kayla, we can join forces and see what we can do to start bringing in funding to make that a reality. And so, could you bring up, once again, another great point is that people, we've been talking to all of these Navajo artists, and I was actually having a conversation with Peter today, which by the way, he said he's going to join us for our spring lecture series.
Yay!
He's about, we have these ones that are coming onto the series. You're with about and go out and they explore other Navajo, but they are people coming in who want to more about Navajo techniques, and this wonderful opportunity for exchange through all different areas. So, last question for you before we go ahead, and when they're the fall with it bit is the first thing that.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
No problem. It's the internet. When you hear the phrase "towel with it bit," what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Grandma. My grandma.
Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, she's a big influence in my life. She still is. Like, I wake up in the morning and I think about her because she was a rug weaver. And when we were younger, she always spent her winters here at Round Rock because it's a little bit warmer than Wheatfields. Wheatfields is very mountainous, and the snow and the roads get very bad. And so my grandma and my Che would spend their winters here, and she would do the loom and we'd do the warping for her. And I was so little, so I could get in between the little crevices when it would get so small to the edge, and I would use my little hands and do that. And she taught me how to talk Navajo. I don't talk it so fluently, but I can understand it. And she always would tell me, there's money underneath your fingertips. Nala beso pansala. And I would look at my fingers like, whoa, there's money in my fingers, Grandma? And now that I'm older and I replay that in my mind, she was telling me to think creatively of getting money. She was encouraging me to hustle, to burn your fingers until they bleed, because once you do that, there's going to be money, abundance of money that's going to help you, because that was her only means of providing for her family, was rug weaving and taking care of the sheep and making sure her sheep were fat and happy so she could have a lot of wool. And that was her bread and butter. And now that I think about it, you go head on with it. You can't stop. And if you stop, then get back up and keep going, because there's no other way to success is if you keep pushing your boundaries and pushing the envelope. And if you stop, then think of a new way to go on. Think about it and make sure that you're doing it with a purpose, and make sure that purpose feeds your soul and it feeds your happiness, your illusion. Make sure your illusion and like that's the way she raised us, was to think creatively. And my Che was like that. He took care of the livestock and he was a farmer, and he would till up the land to make sure our cows had hay for the winter. And that's what when people ask me, I think of my grandparents. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have the lifestyle that I have right now. And the creative juices flowing through me was because of my grandma. So that's why I really respect my elders. And they're funny. I used to call my grandma my little sister Shadeja, because she was Kia Ani, and that's what my dad is, Kia Ani. And so that was his daughter. And so I would tease her and say, "You're my little sister, Grandma." And she loved it. But that's what Awathabe means to me, is going through it and making sure that you're happy. Yeah.
Awesome. That's just awesome, Kayla. I'm so glad that we got a chance to have you on the series, especially since we're going to have Kayla run the series in the springtime. So I hope that you guys really enjoy getting a chance to meet her, learn a little bit about not just her background, but the background in terms of where she comes from both professional and her artistic experience. So we look forward to working with Kayla in the future. And so this is our last segment for the fall semester. So we're going to be wrapping it up, but fear not, we shall be back in the springtime. We have some wonderful individuals that we've already started lining up. Like I said, Peterson Yazzie is going to be joining us. I'm trying to think, Teddy Draper Jr. will be joining us. Emmy Whitehorse, we just got to pin down a date. And so we just have all these wonderful artists who are going to be jumping on board so that we can continue our conversations about the successes and the challenges that we have to overcome as Navajo artists and as Navajo people. So Kayla, if there's anything else you wanted to add?
Let's see. Register for spring classes. Yep. Register. I was always the first one bugging the registrar's office and going over to student success saying, I need these classes. And they would tell me, you don't need that. I'm like, no, I need it. I know what I'm doing. So make sure you register for classes and get your books on time. Make sure you scour the web for the cheapest books, or just borrow some books. But just be prepared for this upcoming semester.
Awesome.
I was once in your shoes.
I know we should use you for recruitment too.
I'm like multi-purpose at this point.
Listen, welcome to our positions.
Yeah.
So, yep, just piggyback on Kayla, make sure that you guys get registered. We have some awesome classes that are art classes that are going to be offered through the Dinner Studies department, as well as the Fine Arts and Humanities. So make sure that you guys get in, talk to the registrar, reach out to Kayla. We'll put her contact information, start following her on Instagram, take a look at her up and coming photography and her events, and we will be seeing you guys in the springtime for our next segment of Call with the Bay. Have a great holiday season. Make sure that you guys are still masking up, still following CDC guidelines. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
Nejanako behatenste, Nejanako, Tigenko behatenste, Heyana,